Hello and welcome back to Mariners Rundown. My name is Jake, also known as Raise the Trident. Thank you for stopping by again for episode 2 of my 3-part season preview for the Seattle Mariners. If you are stopping by on the audio-only platforms, Apple and Spotify, appreciate you. Follow the channel, or I guess follow the show, and leave a review. It helps me out a lot. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. Helps me too. You can like the video as well. I appreciate it. But yeah, we're going to get into the second part of my season preview for the Mariners, which is going to focus on the pitching staff. So we're going to go over the rotation and the bullpen. We're going to talk about every individual player and what's going on with them, what happened last year, what to look for this year, all that great stuff. Give you the context surrounding every single one of them. Ultimately, we are doing this, or I'm doing this show to appeal to not only the fans who are keeping track of the team, very heavily on a day-to-day basis, but also for the fans who are a bit more casual, living life, letting life happen, but also checking in here and there on the Mariners. I just want to give you a pretty easy breakdown to understand about every player. So, when you do go to the ballpark or you do watch that game on TV, you know who you're looking at and what's going on with them. So we're going to start with the rotation. We're going to go from 1 to 5. We're also going to have a 6th player at the very end we will talk about. But like I said, we're going to start at the 1. And this year, the 1, the ace of the staff, the guy getting the opening day nod is none other than Logan Gilbert. Yes, Logan Gilbert is going to be getting the opening day ball for this year, which is super exciting. Cannot wait to watch that live myself. Luis Castillo had it the last 2 years, and now Logan Gilbert is getting it this year, which is great. And last year, Logan Gilbert ultimately earned it. He finished second in Cy Young voting last year, had his best season to date with an all-star selection as well, pitched in 208.2 innings, had a 3.23 ERA, a league-leading 0.89 WHIP, and 22 quality starts. Now, if you don't know what a quality start is, it is when a starting pitcher throws 6 or more innings and gives up 3 or less earned runs. So that means 22 times last year, Gilbert gave the Mariners the best chance to win that game. So I think Logan earned it to get the ace of the staff role pretty much for this year. And Logan's been the epitome of an ace for the last couple years now, and I'm really excited to see him finally kind of thrust into that role now. He was drafted by the Mariners. He's developed under the Mariners for his whole career thus far. He has been a tinkerer. He's been, constantly trying to add new weapons to his arsenal and get better and better. And we've finally seen that come to fruition last year and hopefully for the next few seasons as well. And he's obviously really well liked in the Mariners organization. He's great in the clubhouse. He is great with all the other pitchers, especially the younger pitchers that are coming in like Miller and Wu. And just really excited to see what he has for 2025, because he's made it pretty clear that he is not focused on tinkering much more this year. He is going to be working on just trying to refine his already fabulous arsenal this year, which is, it's going to be really exciting to see him in a much more not necessarily focused on developing as much as focusing on refining this year. So really excited to see what that looks like for him, and hopefully he can limit a couple of those blow up starts. I mean, every starter has it, but it felt like he just had a few games, especially against teams that he should have been pitching pretty well against, like the Minnesota Twins, for example, that were able to get quite a few runs off of him in certain starts. So if he can limit that a little bit well, I think he has a very good case against Tariq Skubal to be in the AL Cy Young not only race, but hopefully win it this year. Next, going into the number 2 spot, we don't necessarily know what the rotation is going to look like, but we are going to go next to George Kirby. George Kirby's 2024 season was a weird one. Although some would consider it kind of a step back season a little bit stats wise. He still had a very solid year, pitched in 191 innings, produced a 3.53 ERA, and led the pitching staff in F4 at 4.2, which is interesting. I'm not sure how Gilbert didn't get that, but Kirby got it instead. The command and control king continued to be the command and control king. He led the league in walks per 9 at a measly 1.08. But I believe a lot of the reason why Kirby's 2024 was kind of seen in a weird light is because at the very beginning of the year, last year, a lot of the narrative surrounding the rotation was, Castillo was the one, he was the ace still. And then you had Logan Gilbert and George Kirby, who were both in very similar spots. And the whole thing was who was going to take the biggest step forward in 2024. And I think a lot of people would have put their money on George Kirby. And obviously, that did not end up being the case. In fact, if anything, George Kirby had a little bit of a worse year than he did in 2023. So it was just very odd to see, his ERA increased by 0.2, which isn't a lot, but it increased a little bit. And Logan Gilbert ultimately leapfrogged him in the order, is now, kind of seen as the ace of the rotation and the opening day starter. And I think a lot of people would have assumed George Kirby may get that in 2025, and he's not. And for that, George Kirby's still a fantastic pitcher. He is staying in the zone. He doesn't walk guys. And that's a huge plus part of his allure. However, in 2025, I feel like Kirby's main focus will probably be to get more swings and misses outside the zone, because it's great to stay in the zone all the time and be throwing lots of strikes. However, when you're not able to get some of that chase and that swing and miss outside the zone, you can be prone to getting hit pretty hard here and there. And then you also aren't going to make it as far into outings because guys are going to be either making more contact or they, I don't know. It just feels like he needs a bit more of that whiff in his game. And we've kind of known that for a little bit now. And I think if he does kind of make a little bit of that adjustment this year, and I think he said it himself that he knows he needs to work on that a little bit. If he can do that and pair that with his already amazing command and control, he can be a Cy Young candidate every year. And hopefully 2025 is when he seriously enters the conversation. I would love to see George Kirby ending in, as like a finalist of the Cy Young, award competition, because he definitely can. It's just a matter of, will he take that step forward this year? But yeah, I think Kirby, he's obviously going to be starting the year on the IL, which is unfortunate due to shoulder inflammation. At this time, it doesn't seem like something that's going to be a long-term issue, at least as of now. There was no structural damage or anything to his shoulder. So, he's obviously going to have a little bit of a late start to the year. But regardless, I would like to see George Kirby take that extra step in 2025 that I think a lot of people expected him to take in 2024, and we'll see if that happens. Moving on to number 3, Luis Castillo. Very weird year for Castillo. He relinquished his ace role to Gilbert. He is entering his age 32 season, and there's starting to be some pretty obvious signs of regression. Now, he still had a solid year last year. He finished the season with a 3.64 ERA in 175 innings, and he still had 175 strikeouts. But it's becoming pretty obvious that over 1,200 innings of mileage on his arm is starting to show. Castillo's fastball over the last couple seasons has declined by half a mile an hour over the last 2 seasons. And in spring training thus far, he's been reading, about a 1 mile an hour decrease on all of his pitches frequently. So that is troubling, to say the least. Now, does this decreased velocity mean he's going to have a trouble this year, or that he's going to run into trouble this year? Maybe, but it's also not for sure, because if he can learn to be a bit better on his command and control this year, and to try to offset that velocity deficit, then he might still be just fine. And, ultimately, if he can still just kind of be the innings eater guy, just a really solid guy in the middle of the rotation, I'm fine with it. Castillo definitely has an uphill battle this year to fight against his aging. However, if he can stay healthy and place his pitches well, I would not be surprised if we get another sub 4 ERA season from him. And if we get that, then that's a win, and I will take it. And yeah, he may not be the ace that he has been, but I still think he has plenty of gas in the tank to be a really solid starting pitcher for us. So Luis Castillo, still, love him. And I'm excited to see what he does this year, even though it's going to be obviously he's going to be under a microscope for sure. Not that like anyone else necessarily isn't under a microscope, but I think Castillo is going to be under the biggest microscope this year as far as his production. So it will be really interesting to see how that ends up for him. Moving on, we have Bryce Miller. Now, in 2025, the sky is the limit for Bryce Miller. After adding yet another pitch to his arsenal this offseason, a cutter, Miller is now up to about 7 pitches in his repertoire, which is really interesting because when he made his debut in 2023, he was essentially a 2-pitch pitcher. He had this fastball and a slider, but last year or last offseason, so going into 2024, he added a splitter. It became his most effective pitch, sporting a batting average against of only 148 and a 225 slug. So it was a fantastic pitch. And it also had a 29% whiff rate. So that splitter worked really well for him. And he added that basically in the offseason. He threw a couple, I believe, in 2023 for Baseball Savant, but he only threw a few. So last year is when he really implemented it into his repertoire, and it worked great for him. And now he's added a cutter this offseason, which is meant to be an extra weapon against left-handed hitters. And so far, the spring has boded well for Miller. He enters the season as one of the biggest AL Cy Young dark horse candidates. Harper, shush. And it wouldn't be surprising to see Miller in the thick of the Cy Young race by the second half. The biggest thing for Miller to improve on this year will be his home and away splits. Miller's been fantastic when pitching in T-Mobile Park. However, when he's on the road, last year opposing hitters had or I think it's his career. Sorry, I was looking at career stats. When on the road, opposing hitters have a 242 batting average against him and a 424 slug. So if he can get those numbers or those away numbers down a bit, Miller is going to have a phenomenal season. And I think a lot of people are under the impression that he could challenge Gilbert for that number 1 spot by the end of the year, potentially. So really excited to see what we get from Bryce Miller. I know I've said I'm excited about a bunch of people. I keep using that way too much. But I am genuinely excited to see what Bryce Miller's 2025 looks like, because 2024 is a little bit of a breakout year for him. 2025 could be a whole nother level than that. So ready to get into it. Next, we're going to talk about Bryan Woo. When healthy, he had a really great 2024. He pitched in 121 innings. Woo posted the lowest ERA of the rotation at 2.89. Woo's fastball in particular was one of the best offerings in the rotation, with a savant run value of plus 14. The main issue for Woo in 2025 was staying healthy. He had multiple IL stints last year, and Woo missed a lot of valuable starts. However, he managed to stay healthy in the second half, and when he did, and that happened after a sit-down talk with catcher Cal Raleigh, who Cal was telling him, like, hey, you need to prepare a little bit better, take care of your body a little bit better, so that you can go out there and perform for the team and help the team win. Woo took that to heart. He stayed healthy in that second half, and when he pitched, he was absolutely phenomenal. I think if he can stay healthy, Woo has just as likely a shot as the other 4 starters to be a Cy Young finalist or even winner this year. He's a phenomenal pitcher, and I'm not gonna say I'm excited again, because my gosh, I need to find something else to say. I think Bryan Woo is another big dark horse for the Cy Young candidacy this year, and I would just love to have a full season from him this year and see what that looks like. What does a full regular season from Bryan Woo look like? And we haven't seen it yet, and I hope that 2025 is the year that we do see that. Lastly, in the rotation, he technically has a spot now because George Kirby's starting the year on the IL, but we're going to talk about Emerson Hancock. He is going to be filling the void most likely in George Kirby's absence to start the year. And really with Emerson Hancock, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on him because there's not really a whole lot left for him to prove. for the Mariners. And I doubt there's a big enough step for him to take to earn like some permanent spot in the rotation outside of a big injury. With that said, Hancock pitched fine last season. More often than not, he gave the team a chance to win, which is ultimately like what you want from a spot starter or fill-in starter. So, ultimately Hancock is not, he's going to be a spot starter and he's going to be the guy who fill-ins for injuries. He's not going to be more than that, at least not on the Mariners. I'm sure other teams would be able to have a rotation spot for him, a more permanent one. The Mariners just don't have that because the five guys that are in the rotation all, and I've said it in this episode, could be Cy Young candidates. And I'm sorry, but Hancock does not have that potential. So, I'm fine with Hancock being that fill-in guy. It's fine because he can give you a chance to win in games. But he is not going to, there's really nothing more to say about him because we kind of know who Emerson Hancock is at this point. So yeah, I think that's going to be it for the rotation. And now we're going to move into the bullpen. Now, before I get into the bullpen, I want to make it very clear that bullpen and reliever arms in particular are super volatile. A guy who pitched really well last year could absolutely stink it up this year, or vice versa. Someone who stunk it up last year could end up being a back end bullpen arm by the All-Star break. We don't know. And we don't necessarily know exactly who all is going to make the bullpen for the opening day roster. So with that said, I'm going to go over the most likely candidates at this point for that. So we're going to start out at the bottom half we're going to start out with Gabe Spire. He's on pretty thin ice for a spot in the bullpen, which is odd to say after his really fantastic 2023 campaign. But on May 30th of 2024, Spire was placed on the IL for a left rotator cuff strain. Since then, it feels like Spire has not been the same player since then, and that's really unfortunate to say. It's felt like his velocity and control have been shot pretty much. Per Baseball Savant, his fastball velocity was down 1.7 miles per hour last year from 2023, which is a huge difference. That's huge. That's more than a tick. That's a couple ticks down. And his walks per nine jumped from 1.8 to 5.3. We were kind of watching it like when he would enter a game, it just felt like he couldn't throw strikes. And that was frustrating. I think a little bit was unluckiness. Like he was close. Like I remember certain outings where it felt like, although he wasn't throwing strikes, like he was like in the shadow zone. He was close. He just wasn't getting any calls, which, I mean, at the end of the day, like it is what it is. You need to throw strikes, more obvious strikes. But with that said, I mean, relievers, like I said, are volatile. There's a chance that Spire, refines what he had in 2023 and becomes the little unit again. However, it's possible that just doesn't happen. And now it's going to be really unfortunate because Gabe seems like a great guy. I have nothing against him. It's just been pretty obvious that like something is up with him to where he just has not been that 2023 Spire that we saw. So wishing him the best. Hopefully he can find it again. And if he does, great. I would love to have him in our bullpen, but time will tell on that one. Moving on, Casey Legumina is who we're going to talk about next. We acquired him via trade from a Cincinnati Reds DFA. He was DFA'd by the Cincinnati Reds, and we picked him up. We traded for him to beat the waiver claim on that, and he's been pretty solid in spring camp thus far. He's only pitched in 22 big league innings in his career, has not had much success. Pretty high ERA for those 22 innings. However, his arsenal and arm slot have been likened to former Mariners closer Paul Sewald. A lot of people say he's like the next Sewald potentially, and he has some good underlying numbers as far as barrel rate, ground ball rate, chase percentage, stuff like that. So he has a good chance at breaking the opening day roster and getting a shot with the Mariners. If there was any org to get the most out of a guy like Legumina, it's Seattle. And pretty sure he's a local guy too, which, is cool. I think I could be wrong on that. So sorry if I'm wrong. And I just ultimately, and this is stupid, but I also enjoy the possibility of him becoming a franchise staple and getting his own legume themed stand at T-Mobile Park. Beans for everyone at T-Mobile Park, the Legumina stand. So yeah, well, I don't think that'll happen, but regardless, it'll be interesting to have kind of like a Paul Sewald or a mini Paul Sewald back in the bullpen if that's possible. And like I said, Seattle is just one of those orgs where it feels like we could get the most out of a guy like him and make him a valuable reliever. Who knows? Moving on to Taylor Saucedo. Once Taylor Saucedo's been on the channel before, which is awesome. He's been the first and only interview I've done of a player. Great guy. He had a solid 2024 season, posted a sub 3.50 ERA and 38.2 innings. Even with this, there's been some mentions of Saucedo potentially missing out on a bullpen spot. However, I feel like that's kind of unlikely as he's like the only lefty left with Spire struggling the way he is. Saucedo does have some good underlying numbers as well, but the biggest thing for him is his walk rate. That needs to improve a bit this year because it can hurt him. There'll be times he'll come in and it feels like he kind of similar to Spire, just can't really throw a strike. And so hopefully if he can work on that walk rate a bit, then that would be helpful. Sauce's spring has not been fantastic, but he's still, the best left-handed option we have at this time. And so I feel like that'll help him probably earn a bullpen spot for opening day. And if he can still have a below 3.5 ERA, like that's fine. That's fine for a reliever. I love Sauce and hopefully he stays on the roster, and I'm rooting for him huge. So hopefully Sauce makes it there and see what he can do for us. Next, we're going to talk about Edward Bizardo. Edward Bizardo does have a shot at making the opening day bullpen. He hasn't pitched much for the Mariners in the big leagues. He's a total of 22 innings to be exact, which is the exact amount as Casey Legumina. Legumina, my gosh, I can't say it. He has, but Bizardo has shown he has some really solid pure stuff. His BABIP last year, which is batting average for balls in play, was 281. So that could suggest a bit of unluckiness here when people were putting in play. They had a good batting average against that because he had some good underlying numbers. If you look at his Savant page, and I know Savant bubbles kind of get memed now, but it's very red. Lots of red on his Savant page. So he has some good underlying numbers. I believe we'll probably see a lot more Bizardo this year than we did last year. He is kind of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of guy where like you never know what you're going to get when he comes in. He'll either be fantastic or he'll be very rough. So that's not great. However, he is out of minor league options. So if they do end up choosing to keep him there, they'll probably give him a bit of a longer leash than usual because then they can't just send him down. They'd have to DFA him. And Bizardo is probably a kind of guy that would get picked up on claims or on waivers if he gets DFA'd. So I think we'll get to see some Bizardo this year, and that's fine by me. He has some good stuff and that works. So that's it for Bizardo. Next, we're going to move on to Trent Thornton, who was kind of an underrated member of the bullpen last year. He was a workhorse. He pitched 72.1 innings last year for a 3.61 ERA and 77 strikeouts. He did give up hard contact a bit more than one would like, but he also got a lot of chase and whiffs. I foresee Thornton's probably going to be a positive and important part of the bullpen going forward. He'll probably continue to be a bit of an innings eater and a fairly effective one at that. I didn't look it up for the video. I know his inherited runner rate, like that was kind of a thing people were noticing, is that if there were runners on, like they would end up scoring if he came in. I didn't look up what his rate was, but yeah, I think Thornton is going to continue to kind of be that guy they go to either eat some innings if there's, been a bad start or kind of a bridge to the setup guys. And I'm fine with that. He's a fine bullpen piece. Works for me. Trent Thornton seems like a great guy. And yeah, that's Trent Thornton basically. Just kind of solid and average is kind of where I'm at with him. So now we're going to go into the potential back end options. Okay, so we're going to start out with Gregory Santos. We acquired him via trade in the 2023 to 2024 offseason from the Chicago White Sox. It seemed like the back end of the bullpen would be stacked going into 2024. We were thinking we would get Santos, Brash, and Munoz at the very end of our bullpen, which would have been phenomenal. Unfortunately, Brash obviously went down with Tommy John, and Santos, we got a total of 7.1 innings from him in 2024, which is super duper disappointing. But going into 2025, it seems like all systems are a go for Gregory Santos, and we will finally see a good first legit dose of him in the Seattle's bullpen. In 2023, Santos pitched in 66.1 innings to a 3.39 ERA and 66 strikeouts. He has a 98-mile-an-hour sinker paired with a nasty slider. He has very good, just nasty, pure stuff. And yeah, he's a pretty obvious setup candidate for Andres Munoz. For him, really, it's just health is the name of the game. Like, I mean, saw single digit innings from him last year. So I would like to see a lot more innings from him this year. And with that said, I think he'll be electric to have in that back end finally of this bullpen. So looking forward to Gregory Santos this year. Colin Snyder, who we're going to talk about next. He was the biggest surprise of the bullpen last year. He had his best season thus far, posting a 1.94 ERA and 41.2 innings. He ended up being the second in command behind Munoz last year by the end of the season. It's tough to say whether Snyder will be effective or as effective in 2025. Last year was kind of the outlier in comparison to his first two seasons with the Kansas City Royals, but he still has, a solid fastball and sweeper. But I think for Snyder, with guys like Santos being back, Troy Taylor on the rise, who we're about to talk about, and Matt Brash coming back by the end of April. It'll be interesting to see what they decide with Colin Snyder. I feel like he'll most likely kind of be shifted back behind those guys going forward. So I don't really know how Snyder's going to do. He also could kind of revert back to what he was with the Kansas City Royals for all we know. And, who knows what's going to happen. But Colin Snyder's still, I think, a solid reliever. I think he's still going to be solid for us this year. And yeah, let's get into the rest of those guys. So speaking of Troy Taylor, let's talk about Troy Taylor. Unfortunately, he suffered a lat strain during the winter when he was starting to ramp up his throwing program. So he's a bit behind in his progression spring training. I believe he is throwing his first live ABs here either today or soon. So that's good, but he's probably not going to start the year on the roster, which is unfortunate. But in his 19 innings at the end of last year, so his little cup of coffee, he struck out 25 batters, posted a 3.72 ERA. He has an upper 90s fastball and a filthy sweeper that garnered a whiff rate of 44.6%. So Taylor definitely has the capacity or the capability of getting enough whiffs and Ks to be a solid back end of the bullpen arm. A lot of people are talking that he could end up being the future closer for the Mariners. And although he won't be ready for opening day, I'm sure he'll be ready pretty soon into April, hopefully. And with that said, it'll be really fun to see him get a long leash this year and see what he can do at the big league level, because a lot of people seem to think he's going to be the future of this bullpen. And so therefore it'll be fun to watch him this year and see how he does, especially with some of the absolute just nasty sweeper that he has and a lively fastball. So looking forward to it. Next, we're going to talk about Matt Brash. Matt Brash's 2023 was one of the better reliever seasons in franchise history. To follow that up, he underwent Tommy John surgery before spring training even ended in 2024. I mean, barely, like, it basically started and he immediately had to go get Tommy John, which is heartbreaking to say the least. He ended up missing all of 2024. And right now, he has been doing some live ABs so far in spring training, which is nice to see. They are saying they think he's going to be back in the end of April. So around the end of April. And that would be huge for this bullpen. Now, the problem is, he just underwent Tommy John surgery. So the question is he going to be as effective as he was before? And we don't know that. Will his fastball still be upper 90s? Will his slider still be one of the best pitches in the game today? Will we get the 2023 Matt Brash back? We don't know. And that's a scary question, because if we could get something like the 2023 Matt Brash back, I mean, man, we're cooking with gas here, like that would be huge for this pen. Um, and even if we don't necessarily get 2023 Matt Brash back, if we get something close to that, that's fine as well. Because Matt Brash has the filthiest stuff in the game. It's like, if you ask opposing hitters, like, what's the best pitch in the game, a lot of people are going to say a Matt Brash slider. And man, it's been too long since we've seen that on our television screen. So I'm really hoping we do see it this year and see it effective. I can't wait for him to come back. So, yep. Hoping Matt Brash continues his throwing program to have no issues, and hopefully we see him at the end of April, because that will be awesome. We're going to end this out with Andres Munoz. So he'll be coming back in 2025. He will be the closer for the Seattle Mariners for sure. He earned his first All-Star selection last year. He ended the year with 22 saves, 59.1 innings pitched, and a 2.12 ERA. So a phenomenal year for Andres Munoz. He also became a fan favorite as well. He takes his cat everywhere he goes, which is really cute. He's learned English very well, which was a nice kind of a touching story last year about him learning English and finally doing media interviews without a translator. Which is, just a testament to how much, these guys put into the craft. Because not only is Andres Munoz trying to be a better pitcher and work on that, but he's also has other stuff like, English classes and stuff like that he's doing to get better at communication. And that's awesome that he's able to do both at a very good level. So that's awesome. So last year's Mariners offense and bullpen health made it pretty rough year for Andres Munoz. Obviously his stats were great, but he had quite a few saves that were more than 3 outs, which made it tough. He was kind of the only real high leverage guy we had in the bullpen for a while, which is tough to put that on him. But now that we're going to be getting Matt Brash back, Gregory Santos, potentially Troy Taylor as well, all those guys could be back into the bullpen guys. Hopefully they are. And if they are, then that takes some weight off of Munoz's shoulders. And they can just let Munoz be Munoz and let him be the closer and have him be a more traditional closer where he's just doing that 9th inning 3-out stuff, because that's where he's going to be most effective. And I'm really hoping that we get that this year, as well as the offense needs to score more runs. So we don't have to worry about using him so much as well. So it goes both ways. But he still has his 4-seam and 2-seam fastball. They were both fantastic last year. His slider, when he's locating it well, can be unhittable too. And with a decreased workload, which is really the main hope for Munoz this year, and less outings where it feels like he, hopefully that helps him so he doesn't have those outings where he feels like he can't locate the ball at all. If he can just, I think a lot of that had to just do with, I think he was dealing with a back strain a little bit last year, and just the workload and the pressure can get to a guy sometimes. And I think that was a little bit of the problem too. So I'm on the Munoz over 30 saves train. I want over 30 saves from Andres Munoz this year. That would be fantastic to see. Hopefully the guys can put him in a position to actually make that happen. That would be great. But yeah, that's it for the whole pitching staff. We went over the rotation. We went over the bullpen. Those are all the guys who are probably going to be in the bullpen. There's obviously other guys in the minor leagues that will probably break the bullpen at some point this year, like a Logan Evans or a Hunter Cranton, Carlos Vargas, who knows? But ultimately, if I were to talk about every single potential candidate, we would be here forever. So, yeah, I just went over the obvious people, but that's going to be it for your pitching staff season preview. I appreciate you if you listened all the way through. If you're on the audio platforms, Apple and Spotify, follow the show, leave a rating, helps me out a lot. I appreciate you for listening on there. If you're on YouTube and watching my ugly mug on the screen while listening as well, appreciate you. You can subscribe. I forgot what you can do on YouTube. You can subscribe on YouTube. That is a thing you can do. And you can also leave a like on the video as well. I'd appreciate it very much. The next episode, or episode 3 of Mariners Rundown, we're going to be going over the division. So we're going to be looking at our division rivals. And then we're also going to do a few keys to having a successful offseason, hopefully making the postseason. So we're going to get into that in the next episode. But thanks for stopping by on this one. That's going to be it for me. And I will see you in the next.